Thank you so much. So happy to be here and so happy to see so many joining us for this discussion. I wanted to start by just saying that some of you here today, may be feeling the stress, right, of what's going on out there in the world, and even though you might be totally fine with your finances, and there's not something that you're feeling a pressing concern of dealing with, but then others of you may be really scared and struggling. And I want you to know that wherever you are in this moment right now, this moment-to-moment relationship with money, if you stay with me on this journey, my promise is that I want to show you a pathway to staying grounded and centered in any circumstance as it pertains to your money. And so with that, let's go ahead and just take a nice big deep breath. And as Maggie was sharing, I am a mindfulness teacher, and so I like to use the breath and taking this moment to just take some nice big deep breaths and pulling your awareness. You might even close your eyes if you're in a place that's safe to do so, but just feeling what it's like to be in your body. Sometimes we can squeeze our toes and squeeze our hands and just bring our attention fully here right now in this moment. And as we breathe into our bodies and we feel this sense of grounded strength inside of our bodies, we can also spend a moment just thinking about our relationship with money and how do we feel when we tune into money. So just noticing where you feel, maybe there's a tightness in your gut or a little pressure in your head or something in your heart. Just noticing when you think about money, how it makes you feel. Beautiful. Thank you for that. And that you can open your eyes and just, come back into this space. But I want to just introduce you to this idea that even when we look inside of our relationship with money and how we feel about it, we can tell that there's a whole lot going on inside, right? And this exercise is meant to show us that everyone has a relationship with money. We rarely think that we're in relationship with it. And what I mean by that is that we have feelings about it, we think about it, and then from those feelings and thoughts, we end up taking action. And so what this conversation today is meant to do is give you some greater awareness about maybe some of the reasons you think and feel the way you do so that your actions are aligned. I mean, like if there was one thing that you walked away from today's conversation thinking about, is that wherever you are on the continuum of having like a super empowering relationship with money or one that feels kind of dysfunctional at times, wherever you are, there's always opportunity to become more empowered inside of yourself and inside of this relationship. So that's my goal, is to help you become even more empowered. And we're going to be talking about a few things, this relationship with money, some research that I feature in my book about scarcity and kind of how it affects us, and a model for looking at scarcity and prosperity and how they kind of compare with each other side by side. Then we'll do a bit of an exercise where I want to show you how you can actually release some of this scarcity stuff that's going on and perhaps, help you, just today and going forward. And then at the end, I'm going to go over a tool that I created that you can use as a guide just to check in and say, hey, am I in a good position, or do I might need to do some things different with my money going forward? So that's what we're going to cover. And, like I said, in this idea of being in a relationship with money, some of us may feel a lot of peace. Some of us feel like, we're always kind of provoking it, like looking at that bank, account and thinking, can I swing this? I really want to do this, but I'm not sure I can afford it. And then sometimes we might be in a position of just feeling really, really stressed out about money and not sure where to turn or what to do. And so as we explore not just the feelings that we have, but what's underneath those feelings, like what's going on, I found that it becomes more empowering in so many ways. And so that's what we're going to be thinking here. I put this chart together because it gives us an idea of what might be happening in our lives with money. Like sometimes we're thinking about it, sometimes we're feeling about it, and sometimes we're doing something with it. And all three parts come together in the center. And when we can find the most amount of happiness, the most amount of prosperity, abundance, is when the thinking, doing, and feeling are in alignment with our core and deepest values, right? So if we have alignment in all three areas of our lives and it fits with what we're doing and thinking and feeling with our money, that's when we have the most greatest sense of empowerment and joy. And so we're trying to do more and more of that. And so I thought if I could tell you just a little bit more about my backstory, because I think it puts some of this into context. My interest with money started at a really early age, like 7. And I noticed, I think early on in life, that this was an important tool and that it was important for me to understand it and to master it. And part of the reason for me being so interested, I think, in money at such a young age is we didn't have a lot at home, and there was a lot of stress and fighting in my home about money. And so I paid more attention to it because I was hearing it be talked about all the time. And I think that that was a really foundational thing for me. And part of the reason I teach about it now is I know what it's like to be inside of money suffering. And I really wanted from a young age to get out of that. And so, you know, the relationship I had early on in life was not a healthy one. Even though I wanted to help myself and to make money, I also sort of made money my God. And what I mean by that is I thought, well, as long as I have a lot of money, I will be happy. Everything will be fine. And that, you know, is not really, as you can imagine, like not necessarily a healthy way to approach money. Like I didn't understand. And it would take me many, many years actually getting my MBA in finance and going to work for an insurance company and then later for a large bank and working in financial services for 25 years, ultimately becoming a certified financial planner. But what happened in the course of me kind of going about my life and my career is I started to notice how traditional money management solutions worked for some, but not for everyone. And so during my career, I witnessed countless people, myself included, struggle with the emotional aspects of money far more than the financial part. And I also noticed that without a guide or a process to kind of unpack it, many of us didn't know what to do, how to change it, how to change what was happening inside so that our world and the outside was more harmonious and more at peace and more successful. So I kind of created money the first time around and became successful with it from a place of like greed and scarcity and fear. And it was like sort of my second chapter in life where I started to notice that there would be a way of making money without it being so laced with those expressions, you know, this scarcity mindset, which is what I ultimately realized I needed to drop away from. And what I also noticed is that there's a stark divide in how many people experience money. And this is what I noticed, like especially as a financial advisor, I would have these deeper conversations with my clients and I would ask them about their relationship with money and I would notice the things that they would do with money. And it kind of started to become very, very stark in comparison. Some people really have mastered this relationship with money. When things would go wrong, they would be able to sail through it and navigate the challenges and come out the other side without having to go into extreme, you know, fits of frustration or sadness or fear or what have you. Whereas a lot of people, and again, I'm putting myself in this other, you know, bucket of kind of behavior with money. It was like there was grasping, there was fear. As a financial advisor and as a mortgage banker, when something would go wrong, these folks would often feel the tendency to like look for somebody to blame rather than kind of looking inside of themselves and saying, well, what can I do different here? And so this stark divide started to show me that many of us either show up with money from a prosperity mindset or from one of scarcity. And it went really, really deep. And so I started to research and try to understand what's happening under the surface for everybody. Like, why do some people have such ease with it and some people struggle so much? And so the deeper I went down the rabbit hole, I started to, come across some research, and I'll share some of this with you here, just touch on it. One of the first things I came across when I was diving in after I'd left my job as a financial advisor and started teaching people about this was that in 2013, Cambridge University realized through their research about some other things that the money personality is actually set by the age of 7. And that was a huge wake-up call for me because, if you think about like what's a 7-year-old doing, they're not necessarily doing anything with money. I mean, very little. What they're doing is learning everything from the world around them, from how their parents are with money, from what's going on economically. Like if you were raised during a recession or a depression, it's going to affect how you think about money. It matters, if there were any big like shakeups that happen in those young formative years, a divorce, a tragic, losing someone you love, like all of these things get to play into this way that we come to be with money. And that was really powerful because that meant that even before we learned about how to use money, we already had an idea of how it works. The other study that was really profound for me is in 2016, Allianz Life Insurance confirmed through their studies of women and success and like what's happening, behind the scenes. And what this study confirmed was that about 50% of women in North America or in the United States worry about being a few bad moves away from destitute poverty. And even when you went up to like a woman making more than $200,000 a year, about 27% of those folks still had this fear that just a few bad moves away from things falling apart. A couple months ago, I did a presentation to several hundred women in the United States, and I asked them at that time, and 61% on the call said they definitely had this fear. So, I can't explain all the reasons why this is the case, but it is important to know that if you fit into that criteria and you've had these fears before, you are not alone. And it's helpful to just notice that because sometimes we beat up on ourselves for these fears because we just don't know where they come from and we think we're the only ones who have them. So a third piece of information was learning about scarcity itself. And so there are two researchers, Sendel and Eldar. They're both professors, Harvard and Princeton. They wrote a book about scarcity, and they found so many interesting things about the way that scarcity captures our attention. One way that I think is just relevant to today's conversation is that when we are operating from this idea of not having enough, to answer a challenge or to deal with our situation in life, we tend to become tunnel visioned. So like we only see this small part of what's going on. We leave out all the other possibilities, right, of what could go right. And we focus on all the problems at hand. And it's like, one of the ways that plays out is we actually have a loss in our IQ temporarily of around 13 points, like losing a whole night's sleep when we're tunneling. So when we get really focused on there's not enough, and we get fear oriented, we will become stupider. Like we actually lose brain cells in that moment. We can't access them. And so it's good to know this. And what I do with this information is I'm really careful because it's not that these fears go away. It's that we can notice that if we're in the heat of the moment and we're feeling like that pressure, that we should wait until we come out of it before we make any big decisions about money. Like don't make decisions in those situations, whether it be pulling all your money from the stock market or, which has been proven to not be a good decision. But sometimes these fears are so strong that we can't resist, doing things that don't help us. And this is one of the reasons why that, again, this science is helping us understand how we operate. And so when you bring all of this together, right? So how we were raised, our biology, our brain chemistry, our fight, flight, and freeze, and our own inner reflection and healing, we bring all of that together and it forms the mindset that we have about money. And, even in this moment, you can just think about what does your mindset with money, what does it tell you about yourself? Maybe it's really confirming to hear this, that you're able to kind of move past those challenges personally. And at the same time, maybe you can notice where you've maybe been hard on yourself because you've struggled with some of these fears in the past, but you haven't been knowing what to do with them. So one of the things also I think is interesting that I'll share about just, being raised, how it's not just in the circumstances in which we're raised, because my brother and I would be perfect examples of how two people can be raised in the same home and yet have completely different mindsets about money. So when I was a child, my father raised us very similarly as it pertains to money. My parents weren't really good with money, so they taught us that way, but I made a decision. I wanted to do something about it. My brother didn't. He just liked to spend money, and he never questioned kind of what was going on, and he didn't question the stress. But one thing that was also different in the way my dad kind of treated me and my father and my brother is my dad would say to me, "The world is your oyster. You can do anything." And he painted a very empowering picture for me that I think really helped me throughout my life. Whereas with my brother, who really struggled with school and he kind of was always in trouble, he never gave him those messages. And so we've grown up, and here I've become a millionaire by my mid-30s by being so focused on taking good care of myself and my family financially, whereas my brother struggles to this day with money. And so I just bring that to mind because it is very complicated that all these different messages we're getting come together to create who we are. And what I've done since learning about this is I started learning about ways that it wasn't just one and done, this is the way you are, you can't change it. What I was curious about was how can we change it? And this is why I left my job as a financial advisor, is I said, I want to help people change the situations. Where might we not be living fully and freely and happily with our core values with money? What can we do differently going forward? And that laid the foundation for the book that I have coming out in July called The Mindful Millionaire. I wanted to give people processes so that if you weren't happy with the way you've been thinking about money, you can take ownership and change that going forward. And interesting enough, I will also say my work isn't just for people who struggle with having money. Sometimes I found that a lot of people have money, but they still struggle with the fear of losing it or the fear of it never being enough, never getting what they set out to get from the money. And we'll talk about that next. So this next chart, what I tried to do was summarize these mindsets that I've seen playing out, like the prosperity mindset and the scarcity mindset. And I feel like I was raised more around the scarcity mindset, and I've been learning how to move into the prosperity mindset. So this sort of just a quick summary. One thing in my research I've seen again and again is the prosperity mindset looks, when we talk about money, there's a perception that money is just a tool that helps you live a fulfilling life. That's all it is. We don't give it any more meaning than just being a tool. In the scarcity mindset, what can happen is money becomes a measure of our worth. For yourself, for others, we use it as a yardstick to decide if we're actually doing a good job in life. And I think that has a lot of flaws connected to it, even though it's so ingrained in our way of thinking. That's not helpful. Like the idea that my value as a human being is associated with my success with money is not the way we need to be looking at it, right? So paying attention to that conditioning is one part of kind of moving our mind away from it being a yardstick of our value. The next is, this idea that money is either to be completely avoided because there's bad things, like money is the root of all evil sort of belief, or completely hoarded. Like I need more, I need more, I need more. There's never going to be enough. I don't want to give because if I give, then maybe I won't get it back. And, that kind of way of being, in comparison to this idea that money is really, it's all about just being conscious with the decisions that we make. Like we can notice that we have a desire to avoid it or to hoard it, and then we kind of find the middle ground. It's like, well, what's really going to make me happy? Oh, that's all it takes to be conscious of it, right? It's just like, oh, I see my tendencies. I'm just not going to respond to those. I'm going to make a better decision because I'm not going to go into these fear kind of approaches with it, especially right now, right? The other thing would be limited supply, thinking that if you have more, I end up with less, or vice versa. This idea of limited supply. And granted, this is a hard one for, I think, if we get really scientific, it's like, wait, there is a limit to how much, there is out there. This is like a spirit, like, I guess the way I would describe it is like a faith in prosperity, as opposed to faith in scarcity. I'll just let you chew on that. Like, do you have faith in scarcity more than you have faith in prosperity? That's how we kind of move to this idea of infinite supply, that there really is plenty to go around. And then finally, and actually most importantly, I think that every time I've worked with a person, at the core of these issues that are coming up, there is this thought, way deep inside of our scarcity mindset that maybe I'm not enough. And I need to go out there and fill the void with something. And the prosperity mindset is I am enough. And even if I don't totally believe that yet, I'm willing to take that as a mantra that I'm going to look at every day and see how I can feel and remind myself that I am enough. So it's kind of interesting to just look at it this way, and we're going to have times for questions at the end. So if you've got some questions, we can go back to these and dive into like, what does this mean? Because I'm sure that there's some of that coming up too. And so what I'm talking about here, right, is this feelings and the mindset are critical. And so what I want to do is take you through an exercise, a real quick exercise, where what I'd like you to do before we go to the next slide is just take a moment to think about like something, how you think. We've already been thinking about this, but like how you feel, what you think, what you do with money, and notice if there's something that you wish to feel better about when it comes to money. So even if you need to close your eyes and just take a pause and just think, is there something that you'd like to feel better about when it comes to money? And as you lean into that thought, you might even notice, like, where is it? Where do you hold that thought, that thought of like, is it in your head? Is it in your gut? Is it in your heart? Sometimes that's helpful to just notice, like you might have had some pressure in one of those areas when you feel into this. And as you do that, I'm going to invite you to think to yourself, underneath this feeling that you want to change, is there a desire for approval, control, or safety and security with this feeling underneath it? Like, and just see if one of those comes up. Like, they might all be present, but maybe one is a little stronger. I really want approval. I want more approval. I want to feel like I have more control. Or, dang it, I just want to feel safer. I just want to feel more secure. And as you tune into that feeling, I want you to just allow that feeling, that desire for more approval, control, or safety, allow it to get bigger for a moment. Just like allow yourself to like be okay with this desire. Like for the first time, you're just giving yourself permission. You're not making it wrong. You're just like, okay, I really want to feel approval and love, right? That ties into love. Or I really, really, really want to be like, feel like I'm in control of my life. Just allow it to be big and good and important to you. And even notice that, you know, there may be things that you do even beyond this conversation today, because we're kind of opening these portals as we tune into this part of ourselves. We're opening portals to the young parts of ourselves that may not have been seen, felt, and witnessed earlier in life. And you get to be in control of that. You get to give yourself these feelings of approval now. Like if you even think of it like, oh, this is a little girl inside of me and she's just, you know, yeah, she'd like some more approval right now, or she'd like more control, or she'd like to feel safer. Awesome. The more you go into that experience and allow yourself to not be wrong for wanting that, the more you allow yourself to be at peace with all parts of yourself. And that's what it takes to break the scarcity mindset, is no longer making ourselves wrong for wanting these things. And what's also really cool is when we no longer make ourselves wrong for wanting these things, we move out of the tunneling and we move into prosperity. We move into like, wow, this is amazing. Is that what I'm trying to do with this thing, you know, with money? I'm trying to get this thing. Well, maybe money, maybe it can help me, but maybe first I just need to give myself permission for this to be okay. And maybe there's actually better ways for me to get this thing that I want. You know, maybe I have to have a conversation with my partner or with a child or with a parent. Like maybe there's something else going on that you're noticing that you'd like to, you know, follow up on. But the point is that when we're no longer making ourselves wrong and we're allowing ourselves to see these things that are underneath the relationship with money, we make ourselves right. We open up the possibilities and we see that there's a full spectrum of choices that we have available to us. And we might even say, gosh, maybe as it pertains to my relationship with money, I can let this feeling go. Or maybe I'm just going to allow it and welcome it and ask it for guidance. Let it show me where I want to go next. How can I make a better decision from this place of understanding what I'm trying to get through my experiences with money, or through the things that I spend money or save money or invest money? You know, in the stock market, I'm a certified financial planner and I still have concerns about the stock market. And instead of making myself wrong about that, I'm like, I find ways to understand that it's this little girl inside of me who came from nothing, who still gets worried about losing, you know, going back to what it was like when I was a child. And I'm not going to make that wrong. And I'm going to create a portfolio that reflects that. I'm not going to say it's wrong for me to be afraid, because that's like denying part of myself, right? So these are the things that I've been coming across, these tools to allow us to just look at our lives a little bit differently and look at our money ever so slightly differently, but open up new possibilities. And like I said, you know, that no matter where we find ourselves on the spectrum of feeling like we have a dysfunctional relationship with money or a super empowering one, we can always like do better. We can always grow. We can always step into a bigger level of expansion in what we want to create for ourselves. And so that's what I'm inviting you to do with this process. And you may want to come back and you know, look at this again and dive in, because it goes really, really deep. So I wanted to just briefly touch on one other thing, because I brought it up earlier, this idea of there is not enough. And I think one of the things we can do for ourselves, if we find ourselves with that sort of scarcity, it pops in, and in that moment we're like, what do I do with this? It feels like there's not enough. It feels like the world's shrinking. I feel like, you know, a lot of fear coming up. I just suggest that you remind yourself that there is plenty to go around, and that the fears many of us have are often not substantiated by reality. And granted, a few months ago we were dealing with, or maybe still, shortages with toilet paper, right? Like, we can and will find solutions to every challenge that comes up. And we just need to remind ourselves that there is enough. We just might have to adjust, in the moment, and then remind ourselves of the real truth of what's going on, not let the irrational fears take over. And then also on this point of like you feeling like you are not enough. And I suggest reminding yourself that we live in a society that does a good job of regularly reminding ourselves, or reminding us through the media, that we are not enough. It's, to be clear, it's like the whole consumer machine is about inspiring us to buy things, right? Like, you need this and you need that and you need this. But when we come back home to be clear about the fact that we are enough, that we're brave and capable and kind and tough and resilient, like, those are the ways that we want to be talking to ourselves, reminding ourselves about just how awesome we really are, and that we're always doing the best that we can no matter what. And giving ourselves permission to remind ourselves again and again, I am enough, I am enough, I am enough. And, before we wrap up, there was a tool that we sent out to everybody that it's a gift. You're going to be able to download it in the email you already got. I think if you scroll down, or after this, there's like a replay email or something that goes out and you'll get it then. But this tool that I created was inspired by the times that we're in. And I just wanted to give people a way of checking kind of where they are in any given moment with money. And so if you do find yourself being really scared, but you also logically know that there's no reason to be scared, you can come back to this tool. Or if you're really on the borderline and you're not sure if you need to make some big changes in your life in any given moment, this is meant to be a tool to help you kind of weigh where you're at and what you want to do and how to make better decisions with money. So just like if you went to the hospital, there's a whole checklist of like, emergency zone, you need to go to emergency right away. That's the spirit of this. And the idea with the emergency zone is you're going to want to take sudden, drastic measures with your finances right away. No blame, no shame, but you need to make some changes. And the guides that I used, which, it's going to be different for everybody, but so this is just rule of thumb. But if you have a sudden and substantial drop in income needed to pay what I call fruit, actually a friend of mine gave me this term, Vincent Pugliese, food, residence, utilities, insurance, and transportation, right? So if you can't pay those things, or do not have at least 3 months of cash reserves on hand to cover loss in income, then you want to see what big changes you need to make in your life immediately. When we went through the last recession in 2008, and I was a mortgage banker at the time, I saw that when changes are happening in the world, human beings often wait too long to make adjustments. And that time is very precious. And that is the spirit of like being really honest, brutally honest with ourselves, or with our children, or with our parents, or with other loved ones. Like, there are times where we get into tunnel and we can't see that we need to make some adjustments. That's the idea behind the emergency zone. Same thing goes with the caution zone. Here, it's like not as severe of a shift, but there's enough to say, wow, I'm not sure if I can get through this. And so that's the idea of the caution zone. Notice if you're in that place where maybe you can make it, but maybe you can't. Maybe you need to evaluate your options for reducing expenses, paying close attention to non-essentials, and again, focusing on self-compassion and self-understanding while finding where to cut the expenses and still keep the joy in your life. And then the goal zone is that your symptoms are under control. There's no action needed at this time. You can celebrate all your hard work paying off. You just use this as a guide, like I said, and there's some symptoms that you can go into. And then finally, the wellness zone, because I feel like sometimes all, we're in the green zone, we're in the goal zone, and yet our mind is like going all over the place. And so my suggestion is, with action, if you're feeling just the pressure of sluggishness, tired, poor appetite, overeating, drinking too much, feeling depressed for extended periods of time, please reach out to others. Find resources that can bring you comfort and joy and peace of mind. And, reminding yourself that this too shall pass. And that I personally have found that when we come together with like-minded people and we have these conversations with each other, we feel so much better because we do not feel alone, and our problems and our tunneling does feel very lonely. So don't allow that to happen. This is the reason, I think, behind why I wrote my book, The Mindful Millionaire, was I knew that we needed discussions about money in really profound, deep ways like we're having here today. I also created a community on Facebook that helps people also have those discussions. And while I'm sort of leading the discussion right now in the group, when the book comes out July 14th, my hope is that people will read the book and then be able to bring their own stories and share them in community and hold sacred space for our own experiences and our own journey of moving from prosperity to scarcity. And it's not a one and done, right? It's not even like a marathon, like it's not a destination. It's a journey that continues throughout our whole life. So how can we come together and hold this space of just such beautiful awareness for each other? Remind us of our truths, of our own enoughness. So in summary, money is a tool. The more you understand your relationship with it, the easier it is to manage. When we know how we think, feel, and act with money, we tend to take better care of it and better care of ourselves. And the greater we understand it, the more empowered we become, not just with money, but in creating the life we really, really, really want to be living. And so I put this here, the mindfulmillionairebook.com. The reason I also want to mention is I'm going to be doing some free workshops after the book comes out at the end of July. And if you pre-order it and you go back to this site and you fill out your information, you'll get all kinds of freebies and get invited to that discussion, which will be super fun if you enjoyed today and it's speaking to you. And then feel free to reach out, and I'm excited to hear your questions, if there are any.
Okay, thanks, Leisa. That was excellent. I just wanted to let you know I'm seeing some comments in the chat. One here is saying you had a very calm and soothing voice, so I wanted to let you know about that. And I also wanted to share a comment. Someone saying that they liked the "have faith in prosperity" comment that you made. That was really helpful.
Thank you.
So I will remind everyone, if you have a question, you can use the chat box or you can email info@savvyladies.org. And I'm also seeing more comments coming in, just thanking you again for all this helpful information. So we'll get started with the first question for you is saying that I'm now in a place where I feel comfortable with my day-to-day lifestyle and I have a little bit of savings, but I'm worried about planning for long-term goals like retirement. Do you have some tips for dealing with fears that are about the future?
Beautiful. Yeah, so it's so interesting because I'm going to confess something that might also give perspective to just thinking about the question deeper for the person asking it. I've found that I get way more active in saving for the future when I have goals associated with it. So for my husband and I, the way we built our wealth was by investing in real estate. And I noticed that I save a lot more money when I have a purpose, a destination, something that like focuses my attention towards it. And in the book, Brad Klontz is a friend of mine. He's a financial psychologist and financial advisor, and they did research about like a a 7-step process that we can go through that was not just his idea, but they tested it and they proved that people save more money when they have a very, very specific process that they go through, starting with like designating accounts. So with retirement, specifically in this question, what comes to me is like, really take some time to think about what it is that retirement represents to you and what you want it to look like journal about it. Visualize what it's going to look like. See yourself, if you want to live somewhere else, what that looks like, what you want to feel on a daily basis. Maybe you still want to work, but you want to work less, or maybe you want to pivot and you want to do work that is, closely aligned to giving back. Like, take the time to come up with what that's going to look like, so that when you're putting money away for retirement, whether it be in a 401k or in, an IRA, or just saving, right, that you have ultimate discretion around, and it's not a retirement account, any of those ways, the more you know what you're saving it for and what you want to create, the more likely you are to save that money and commit to it long term. And even if it changes, that's okay, because we change and our goals change. But what's cool is when we set those goals, they already give us a target, and they also show us if some of that stuff that we thought was important isn't. Like, it starts to work itself out. So hopefully that helps.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Leisa. Another question is saying, I love the tips that you shared, but how do I really not feel the scarcity when I've just lost my job? I have a little bit of cushion, but I'm really starting to freak out.
Yeah, such a powerful question. Thank you for asking it, because I'm sure you're not alone, today in the folks watching and also in the replay. Let's go back to that topic of the scarcity and the tunneling. And I think this is what we're wanting to just dive into a little deeper here. And that is that, what can you do for yourself that brings you into joy? And for me, when I've lost jobs in the past unexpectedly, I noticed that there was a period of grieving, and there's nothing that I'm going to say that doesn't. I feel like it's really, really important to allow grieving to like complete its cycle. So I just want to say that. But once that grieving starts to soften, and we can start to kind of look out and, out of our bunker and look around and say, okay, what's next? My suggestion is to find your joy. Find your joy in your skills, the things that you love to do, maybe from that work that you were doing before, but also look at where might there be things in your life that you weren't doing that you want to do more of. What I've found in all of my research is that when we are tapping into our gifts, like our amazing gifts, not just because we're awesome at it, but also because we love doing it, we align ourselves with our true self, our true purpose in life. And it allows us to get out of the scarcity, move into the prosperity, and start thinking about and envisioning what's next. Is it another job? And now you're honing in and you're getting really focused with your energy about what it is that you do want and that you're wanting to create. And the final step of that is give yourself permission. Even if it seems totally crazy in the moment, give yourself permission to say, I not only want that, but I give myself permission to have that in my next job. Or, some people are going to start side hustles or start businesses right now because they're seeing an opportunity for that. But no matter what, it's important that we lean in and give ourselves official permission to have what we most want. And that can include the, joy of doing things that you love. And it works not just some of the time, like every time. So I hope that helps, but it's worked for me over and over again and lots of my clients.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you. I believe this is the last question, which is saying, I was really interested to hear about money personalities forming by age 7. I do want to be aware of things that I can do to help my young kids develop a good relationship with money. Do you have a tip for me?
That's right. It's funny. One of my clients on the early versions of my book, she's like, by the way, you're not just writing a book for adults, you're actually writing a parenting manual. And I was like, okay, so yeah, thanks for the reminder. This is really important. The best that we can do for our kids is to get our own money story, in alignment with our core values. And I'll just be honest, like it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, I wrote the book because I want people to be able to take themselves through the process. So I'll just explain a little bit of this book. It's like $18 on Amazon in the hard copy. I also recorded the audio version last week. So if you like my voice, you can also get it in audio. But I wrote it in 3 parts. The first part is like kind of what we were talking about today, like what's inside of that relationship with money. But the second part, which is what is going to answer your question, is it's an 8-step process of journaling and looking inside of like, what's your story? And if you don't understand it, the questions that you walk through at each step are going to help you better understand your own relationship with money. And in the course of that, you're going to see the things that you're probably telling your kids that you're not even aware that you're telling them, that have to do with your story. And the only way to change it is to become aware and conscious of it so that you don't pass it on to them unconsciously. So when you come out of the 8-step process, you're reinventing consciously what you want your money relationship to look like. Similar to the book, The Artist's Way, I modeled it after that, where you're just going through those steps to help yourself do exactly this. And it's really helped me because my kids have a very healthy sense of money, but I used to do things that I just crack up. One thing was I just bought a brand new car and we're in line at the grocery store, and my son, who's like 6 or 7 at the time, said, Mom, can I have this candy bar? And instead of saying to him, no, you can't have a candy bar, I was like, no, we can't afford it. And this is when I was doing this work, which is just embarrassing, but maybe it was like 8. And he's like, Mom, you just bought a brand new car and you can't buy this candy bar. And I was like, okay, like we need to look at this. Like this is the conditioning, pure and simple, of the things that we do and we don't even realize we're saying that make absolutely no sense. So thank you for the question.
Mm-hmm. And thanks for the comments there. Leisa, I just want to let you know I've seen so many comments come in thanking you. I'll share some of them here. I had a real moment of clarity and appreciate this webinar. This is the best advice from a financial advisor so far. Enjoyed this tremendously. Just so many messages thanking you and just sharing comments that this was really helpful for everyone. So again, I want to thank you, Leisa, for speaking to us today. As Leisa mentioned, we'll be sending out a follow-up email with links that are on this slide here, and also the resources that Leisa shared as well. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today, and thank you so much, Leisa. It was just excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.